The death of the last male descendant of the founding Arpad dynasty opened a new period in Hungarian history. For the next 2 centuries, the Holy Crown of St. Stephen was worn by a succession of foreign rulers, elected by the powerful lords of the land. The first of these foreign monarchs, Charles Robert, came from the French Angevin dynasty of Naples. A descendant of the Arpads in the female line, he owed his election to the support of the Pope, who sent his envoy, Cardinal Gentile, to Hungary in 1308 to remove the last obstacles to the throne. The most important task was recovering the Holy Crown, which had come to symbolize the continuity of Hungarian statehood. Only after a 3rd coronation had been performed with the Holy Crown was Charles Robert recognized as the country's legitimate ruler. Before the orb of royal power could rest securely in Charles' hands, he had to challenge the might of the oligarchs, who effectively controlled most of the kingdom. Under the last Arpad rulers, central authority collapsed as the most powerful barons, the Kőszegys, Máté, László Khan, and others, tore the country into independent provinces and ruled them as little kings. Secure in their impregnable fortresses, they maintained their own courts, entered into alliances with foreign powers, and ignored the legitimate monarch. The most formidable opponent, Máté of Trenčín, owned more than 30 castles in the northwestern provinces of Hungary. Taking temporary residence in the border fortress of Temesvar, Charles launched a 13-year campaign against the oligarchs, laying siege to one castle after another. Building up an armed force with the support of lesser nobles and townsmen, the king gained his first important victory in 1312, when he defeated the Aba clan in a hard-fought battle outside of Kassa. Further victories at Debrecen, Komárom, and elsewhere finally turned the balance in favor of the king. After the death of Máté, Charles could demonstrate royal power by moving his court to the fortress of Visegrad in the heart of the country. The reunification of the country was now complete. Rewarding his followers with properties confiscated from the oligarchs, Charles created a new aristocracy, loyal to the Angevin dynasty. Most of the captured castles, however, were retained as a political power base by the king, who entrusted them to reliable barons. In order to place the monarchy on a firmer financial footing, Charles reorganized royal revenues and the monetary system. Hungary's abundant resources of gold, silver, copper, and salt provided the basis for an economic boom in the 14th century, thanks to the king's judicious mining reforms. While preserving the royal monopoly of precious metals, Charles encouraged mining by sharing a third of the profits with the landowner on whose property the mine stood. Later measures provided even greater incentives for landowners to open their estates to prospectors. Following the discovery of new gold deposits in the 1320s, one rich mine after the other was opened in northern Hungary and Transylvania. Miners, armed with picks and oil lamps, descended into narrow shafts to send baskets of ore topside, where it was ground and smelted in foundries. With the aid of German mining specialists who employed the most advanced technology of the day, such as hydraulic ore crushers, Hungarian mines accounted for a third of Europe's total gold production in the mid-14th century. Wealthy mining towns sprang up on the territory of present-day Slovakia. Kermit-Spania was the center of gold production and site of the Royal Mint. Here, the famous Hungarian florins were coined with a precision and weight that was unaltered for centuries. Szelmecbánya was the main producer of silver, while Bestecebánya became the locus of the copper industry, whose economic importance continued long after gold and silver mining had diminished. The stream of precious metal into the royal treasury enabled Charles to become the first Hungarian king to initiate a coherent fiscal policy. Abolishing the old practice of reminting all money in circulation yearly as a means of raising revenue, he introduced silver coins that had a constant value. In 1325, Charles ordered the minting of gold florins modeled on the Florentine example, which quickly became one of Europe's most stable currencies. The king's monetary policy created favorable conditions for foreign trade and economic development. Hungary entered the world market as a supplier of raw materials, exporting precious metals, cattle, hides, and wine to Western Europe, and importing fine textiles, metalware, spices, and other luxury goods. The structure of trade, however, inhibited the growth of urban centers, since foreign commodities were purchased to the detriment of domestic producers. The profits from precious metals enriched Italian and later South German merchants. Only they had the capital needed for the exploitation of the country's mineral resources and the connections to export them. While the flood of gold and silver made the king and court very rich, the luxury items they imported did not encourage local manufacturing. Hungary was destined to remain an agrarian country. Large-scale cattle breeding on the Great Plain became the most important sector of the country's economic life by the 15th century, when huge herds of longhorns were driven to German and Italian cities. Probably introduced by the nomadic Cumans, this new variety of cattle surpassed all other breeds in body weight. Production of wine for domestic and foreign consumption constituted another major industry as viniculture replaced the growing of grain in many regions of the country. Wines from southern Hungary were as prized in medieval times as the famous Tokaj in later centuries. The dynamic growth which characterized the 14th and 15th centuries was made possible by a period of unparalleled stability and domestic peace under Angevin rule. Consolidation was closely connected with the foreign policy of King Charles, who sought good relations with his northern and western neighbors. Hungary's new prestige in Central Europe was demonstrated when Charles convened a meeting of the kings of Bohemia and Poland at Visegrad in 1335. Amidst the picturesque setting of a Gothic palace on the Danube, under the shadow of a mountaintop citadel, the royal guests and their courts were lavishly entertained. In a triumph of personal diplomacy, Charles successfully arbitrated dynastic conflicts between Bohemia and Poland. This cleared the way for a long period of cooperation among the three kingdoms. A friendly relationship with Poland had existed from the very beginning of Angevin rule. These ties were strengthened by the Visegrad meeting, making the alliance with Poland an enduring element of Hungarian foreign policy. When Charles died in 1342, he left his son Louis a consolidated and powerful realm. Filled with ambition for conquest, Louis was the epitome of a medieval warrior king. Contemporaries were struck by his commanding personality. A Venetian envoy attested that he had never beheld a more majestic or mighty monarch. Louis used the full treasury inherited from his father to launch an aggressive foreign policy. Yearly campaigns provided the Hungarian nobility with military action and regular income in the form of loot. The Angevin era witnessed the heyday of the heavily armored knight and the full flowering of chivalry. Crests and coats of arms enhanced the prestige of royal dignitaries who commanded troops under their own banners. Many lesser nobles took service in the armies of these lords. They followed Louis to Naples, where he sought to avenge his murdered brother and assert his rights to the South Italian kingdom. It proved easier, however, to conquer a far-off land than to keep it. The Italian campaigns were costly and ultimately futile. Upon his return, Louis took the momentous step of calling an assembly in 1351, where he reissued the Golden Bull of Andrew II. Full noble status was now extended to thousands of poor country nobles. All landowning warriors, baron and lesser noble alike, were henceforth entitled to the same freedoms, such as personal liberty, exemption from taxes, and limited military service. They were also entitled to sit in judgment over their dependent tenants. In the final analysis, the standing of a Hungarian noble rested on his ownership of land. If for any reason he lost his land, he lost his noble status. The law of entail, an amendment to the Golden Bull, decreed that ancestral estates must remain forever the property of the original owner and his male descendants. This law, which remained in force until modern times, made the selling of land difficult. Only in the 19th century did its economic consequences become obvious. Clan traditions dating from the Arpad age proved so strong that Western feudal practices, such as the granting of lands in exchange for services, never took root in Hungary. The Eastern European variant of feudalism, which evolved in the Angevin period, permanently divided Hungarian society into two classes, the nobility and the peasantry. By the early 14th century, the overwhelming majority of the population consisted of tenant farmers who paid dues in cash or produce and performed minimal labor services on their landlord's estate. In exchange, they were allowed to own a cottage, a garden, and a family plot to till. Peasants from each village also enjoyed access to common pastures and woods. No longer serfs, they had acquired the right to move freely and change their landlords. Despite his failure in Italy, Louis reasserted Hungarian supremacy in the Balkans and the Adriatic. Following two wars with Venice, the rich Dalmatian coastal cities, including Dubrovnik and the crucial port of Zadar, were brought under Hungarian rule. Louis's triumphal entry into Zadar was commemorated on a silver sarcophagus containing the relics of the city's patron saint. The Dalmatian merchants, depicted in the relief scenes, had good reason to look to the Hungarian-Croatian kingdom on account of their trade interests. Successive campaigns established Louis's nominal rule over Bosnia, Serbia, Wallachia, and Moldavia. His dream of creating a great Anjou empire was temporarily realized when he gained the Polish crown in 1370. Louis sent his Polish-born mother Elizabeth to Krakow to govern in his place. But Angevin rule in Poland ended only a few years after the king's death. It was replaced by the Jagiellonian dynasty, which was later to provide 3 monarchs for Hungary. Although Louis's empire proved short-lived, the cultural legacy of the Angevin age has endured in monuments of Gothic art and architecture such as the Bishop's Palace in Győr and the Royal Chapel in Buda Castle. Zoyom Castle, one of King Louis's favorite hunting residences, was built in the style of an Italian palace. Like many other Gothic structures, it later acquired Renaissance features. A similar rectangular plan, with 4 corner towers, was employed in the construction of another royal hunting castle at Diósgyőr. Deeply religious, the king spent the final years of his life in solitary contemplation, immersed in humble prayer. Always generous to the church, Louis endowed pilgrimage sites, like the Hungarian chapel at Aachen, with precious relics fashioned by court goldsmiths. Enameled clasps, for vestments worn by members of the chapel choir, prominently displayed Anjou heraldic symbols. The most exquisite piece of Hungarian goldsmith's art is the reliquary bust of St. Laszlo from the beginning of the 15th century. Laszlo personified the Christian knightly ideal which Louis and later kings strove to emulate. Another embodiment of chivalry is the statue of St. George, produced by the Kolozsvári brothers. It is considered the finest surviving example of medieval Hungarian sculpture. A patron of learning as well as art, Louis attempted to follow the example of Prague, Vienna, and Krakow by founding a university in Pécs in 1367. Like the University of Buda, 3 decades later, however, it proved short-lived. The growth of literacy in the Angevin period gave rise to richly illuminated chronicles and prayer books. Masterpieces of book art, such as the Nekje Bible, revealed the close Italian ties maintained by the court. Created by a Bologna workshop for Lord Chief Treasurer Demeter Nekje, the Bible is one of the most prized manuscripts in the Library of Congress collection. Another gem of illumination, the Anjou Legendary, included the lives of Laszlo and other popular Hungarian saints among its miniatures. The most splendid manuscript produced for the Royal Library was a profusely illustrated chronicle of Hungarian history. The elegant figures are rendered in a Neapolitan French style that reflects the Western knightly culture promoted by the court of Louis. Nevertheless, a consciousness of distinctive Hungarian traditions is displayed on the very first page of the chronicle. The image of Louis as a wise ruler presides over 2 groups of courtiers. While the figures on the right of the king's throne are dressed in the manner of Western knights, the dignitaries standing on the left are clad in Oriental robes. This carefully contrived balance may be interpreted as an expression of Hungary's unique position between East and West. Under the Angevin kings, the Hungarian monarchy reached the height of its power. The fragile nature of a monarchy based on a group of loyal aristocrats quickly became apparent after Louis the Great's death in 1382. When the throne passed to his daughter Mary, civil war broke out that ended only after the election of her husband, Sigismund of Luxemburg, in 1387. Sigismund was the son of Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, whose brilliant court turned Prague into the cultural and artistic center of Europe. The era of great monarchs in East Central Europe, however, was drawing to a close. Sigismund obtained the Hungarian throne only at the cost of major compromises that forced him to give away royal rights and lands. From the outset, his hold on the kingship was tenuous at best. It took him nearly 2 decades to consolidate his rule. By the end of his 50-year reign, most of the royal castles and estates had been given away to his supporters. The power of the nobility was thus enormously increased. This marked a turning point in Hungarian history. An aristocratic dominance was established that would endure until modern times. Early in his reign, Sigismund had to confront the rapid expansion of the Ottoman Empire in the Balkan Peninsula. The Turkish victory at Kosovo in 1389, which destroyed the independent Serbian kingdom, spelled an end to Hungarian dominance in Southeastern Europe. Not only were Hungary's former vassal states in the region subjected to Ottoman control, but the southern borders of the kingdom were now exposed to Turkish raids. To stem the Turkish advance, and hurl the infidels back across the straits to Asia Minor, Sigismund assembled a huge international army of crusading knights. Sure of victory, the host of French, Hungarian, and other warriors boasted that their lances could have held up the sky. The Crusade of 1396, however, ended in disaster at Nicopolis. As a consequence, the offensive policy of the Arpad and Angevin kings had to be abandoned. For the first time since the Mongol invasion, Hungary was placed on the defensive against a more powerful adversary. In the wake of the Nicopolis defeat, Sigismund confronted unrest and a succession of baronial conspiracies at home. At one point, the king was even taken captive while a council of the realm ruled in the name of the Holy Crown. He found refuge in the castle of Siklos, owned by Miklos Garai, one of the country's greatest magnates. Only in 1403 did Sigismund finally succeed in stabilizing his rule by crushing the last revolt. A few years later, he united his staunchest supporters in a formal league known as the Order of the Dragon. Despite the xenophobia of his subjects, the king continued to rely on counselors of foreign origin. The Polish knight Stibor, for example, was made Viceroy of Transylvania. Another foreigner, the Florentine merchant Filippo Scolari, served as governor of southeastern Hungary. A man of cultivated tastes who spoke 7 languages, Sigismund followed his father's example as a patron of the arts. He had his portrait painted by early Renaissance masters. During his reign, Buda became the royal capital once again, in place of Visegrad. He commissioned foreign architects to erect many buildings, fortifications, and above all, a magnificent Gothic palace on the city's castle hill. A knight's hall where festive ceremonies were held, and fragments of ornamental figures in the soft sculpture style provide an idea of Sigismund's elegant court. Carved ivory saddles depict other images of medieval chivalry and courtly love, drawn from the romances of troubadours. Fond of displaying his majesty in every possible way, the king made presents of the saddles to foreign princes. Sigismund's interests shifted to broader European affairs after 1410, when he was elected Holy Roman Emperor. For the first time in its history, Hungary was joined in a personal union with the German lands. As the highest-ranking secular prince in Western Europe, Sigismund was committed to restoring the unity of the Church and the peace of Christendom. During the last decades of his reign, he spent many years abroad, journeying as far as London in an attempt to halt the 100 Years' War between France and England. A born mediator, Sigismund played a leading role in the Council of Constance. Princes and prelates with their retinues, together with thousands of other participants, crammed into the South German city for the greatest assembly of the Middle Ages. Respectful of learning, Sigismund followed the disputes among theologians from famous universities with great interest. "I could knight 1,000 ignorant men in one day," he wittily remarked. "But I couldn't create a single doctor in 1,000 years. Displaying considerable negotiating skill, he ended the Great Schism that had split the Catholic Church for 40 years. The success of the council, however, was overshadowed by the trial of the Czech reformer Jan Hus, who was convicted of heresy and burned at the stake in spite of the safe conduct offered to him by Sigismund. The burning of Hus touched off a storm of resentment in Bohemia. The Hussite Revolution, a religious revolt against the worldliness and corruption of the church hierarchy, sent shockwaves across Central Europe. Although Hussite raids were confined to the territory of northern Hungary, the intellectual impact of their movement was felt throughout the entire country, inspiring the first translation of parts of the Bible into Hungarian. Sigismund organized successive anti-Hussite crusades to gain the Bohemian throne inherited from his brother. Every invasion was defeated by the warriors of God, townspeople and peasants armed with flails and pikes, who became the best army of their time. Their greatest innovation was the wagon fort. Chained together, the wagons offered protection against mounted knights, whose dominance on the battlefield was now challenged by foot soldiers. Well suited to new trends in warfare, the mobile Hussite infantry subsequently had a great influence on Hungarian military tactics. While Sigismund was preoccupied with German and Bohemian affairs, Venice seized the opportunity to reconquer the Dalmatian ports. After 300 years, Hungary's presence on the Dalmatian coast came to an end. Sigismund was the first Hungarian king to recognize the political importance of Hungary's rapidly growing towns. To strengthen their legal and economic position, extensive privileges were granted to some 20 free royal cities fortified by stone walls. As in Western Europe, stone walls with strong gates became a symbol of the city's autonomous status, providing protection not only against marauding armies, but also the tyranny of neighboring lords. Gothic town halls were the other great emblem of municipal freedom. Here, the city council, dominated for the most part by German burghers, represented the interests of the merchant patricians. Perpetually short of money, Sigismund saw the increasing prosperity of the towns as a source of revenue. He supported the rising merchant class and solicited their grievances and suggestions. His urban laws of 1405 tried to stimulate trade by abolishing internal tolls and standardizing weights and measures throughout the country. Other decrees attempted to safeguard the interests of domestic merchants against foreign competition, especially in the textile trade. The underdeveloped nature of the Hungarian economy, however, impeded manufacturing and industry. The peripheral location of the free royal cities indicates that urban development was largely dependent on external trade. Pozsony, Sopron, and Zagreb were the gateways to Western Europe. Nagyszombat, Bartva, Eperjes, and Kasia grew up on the trade routes to Bohemia and Poland, while Szeben and Brașov stood at the mountain passes to the Balkans. A thriving center of linen production was established in Bartva. The houses of prosperous merchants lining the main square have retained the layout of a medieval town. Kasia was another city which grew rich from the trade route to Poland. Its magnificent cathedral, embellished with a profusion of delicate tracery, carved reliefs, pinnacles, and spires, is the finest example of high Gothic architecture in historic Hungary. The cathedral's high altar also reflects the civic pride of the wealthy burghers, whose earthy features and lifestyle are captured with late Gothic realism on the panel scenes. In the last decades of the 15th century, monumental altars with pictures on movable wings became a widespread feature of northern Hungarian churches. They were the most splendid artifacts of a burgher culture open to the most advanced currents of contemporary Europe. The memory of urban prosperity also survives in the burgher houses of Buda. Their main gateway opened into a wide passage with sitting alcoves to the right and left for guests and servants. Other burgher residents can still be seen in the old Jewish quarter of Sopron. The medieval character of Saxon cities in Transylvania, such as Seben and Szegeshvar, has been preserved nearly intact. The imposing parish churches of Kolozsvár, Brașov, and other Transylvanian cities are lasting monuments to this golden age of Hungarian towns. Sigismund's reign witnessed a high point in Hungarian urban development that was not to be equaled until modern times. Few in number, Hungary's cities were small in comparison with their Western European counterparts. Even the largest, such as Buda, Kassa, Sopron, and Pozsony, had only a few thousand inhabitants. With their largely foreign population, they were isolated outposts in what seemed to travelers as an empty land. There was virtually no network of cities in the interior of the country. Instead, commodity production was concentrated in several hundred market towns. These were really no more than large villages which held weekly markets and fairs. Whereas the citizens of the royal cities were free people, the inhabitants of the market towns were still considered tenants under the jurisdiction of the local lord. Ultimately, the low level of urbanization made it impossible for the cities to gain a political role in alliance with the crown. This was of fundamental significance in a century marked by the growing influence of the estates. These social orders were comprised of the propertied classes, the nobility, the clergy, and burghers. Everywhere in Europe, the estates acquired the constitutional right to form parliamentary assemblies called diets, where, represented in person or by deputies, they had the right to vote on the laws of the realm in accordance with the principle, that which concerns all must be sanctioned by all. In East Central Europe, where there were few rich cities, government by diet gradually assumed the form of a republic of nobles, which restricted the power of the king and made the nobility the real masters of the realm. In the last decades of Sigismund's reign, Hungary was gravely threatened when the Ottoman Empire expanded its control to the Balkan buffer states that had previously protected the kingdom from immediate Turkish attack. Rising to the challenge, Sigismund entrusted one of his ablest lieutenants, Filippo Scolari, to build a chain of fortifications along the southern border. Scolari and his successors established 2 lines of forts from the lower Danube to the Adriatic Sea in Croatia, covering a distance of some 400 miles. The keystone of this system, the Castle of Belgrade, was acquired from the ruler of Serbia in exchange for estates in Hungary. Although the defense line could not stop periodic Turkish raids, it shielded Hungary from a major invasion for almost a century. The maintenance of permanent garrisons, however, strained the country's financial resources to the limit. With only token assistance from the West, the Hungarian kingdom was left to defend Europe from the growing power of the Ottoman Empire.